Good evening and welcome to Local Food Forum's Better Dialogues, the pros of regenerative agriculture. My name is Bob Benenson. I'm the publisher, editor, and writer for Local Food Forum. I have a lifelong passion for food. I was an early adopter of the good food movement as a consumer during a 30-year career as a political journalist. And when I moved to Chicago in 2011, I became a full-time good food activist. I worked for a nonprofit, and then in 2021, I started Local Food Forum to provide a platform specifically for the people across the spectrum of the local food ecosystem, people I like to call everyday heroes, who are working every day to try and build a better food system. I'm pleased to have Chef Sarah Stegner, who I admire greatly, as my co-host, and I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, thank you. Thank you all for coming on and being part of this important discussion. I am Sarah Stegner. I own Prairie Grass Cafe in Northbrook. It's a 20-year-old restaurant, and I was one of the founders, along with Abby Mandel, started Green City Market, and I helped her do that. And that was 25 years ago, and the market opened April 6th. That was pretty exciting for all of us. I'm also a member of Chicago Chefs Cook, which is a humanitarian organization that comes together to amplify chefs' voices about important issues that we can fundraise for and support. And Ida Davidman is part of Chicago Chefs Cook. Darren Guest and Melissa Clark are my partners in crime, and I want to thank them for all their support and for being here today. And Amanda Puck from Mariano's, she has been so valuable in making this happen, and she is fun to work with, and we appreciate everything that she does. And then Rebecca Fife is kind of a hero in this whole situation, that she's been the one to pull all of the pictures, the slides together, and to use her amazing talent to help us navigate this. She owns Landmark Pest Management, and she's quite a force in the Chicago area. We are grateful to have her on board. And then there's all of you. We know, between Bob and I and the rest of you, we know a lot of you. So this is like a family coming together to have a discussion. I think it's so important because these conversations, they need to happen. They need to filter out into the general public. And these are the voice of experts that will help guide us and give us the information we need to move forward. So if you want to kick it off, Bob, with the rest of the introductions.
Yes, here's what we're here to discuss today. The rich, deep soils of the upper Midwest drew and sustained generations of farmers. But since the mid-20th century, the rise of conventional agriculture, with its emphasis on chemical inputs and monoculture crops, caused us to lose much of our vital soils and drain them of nutrients. Farmers concerned about sustainability have pushed back, first through the organic movement, and today with the rise of regenerative agriculture, with its central focus on restoring and nurturing soil health. Its advocates say that regenerative agriculture is the key to ensuring a sustainable food supply, restoring the nutrient density of soil, and even combating climate change. Joining us to discuss regenerative agriculture are four experts, all who come at the issue from different professional perspectives. So I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourself, starting with Paul Lightfoot.
Thanks so much, Bob. It's a joy to be here. I'm the general manager of Patagonia Provisions, so I lead the food and beverage division within the company Patagonia that you might know better for its apparel business. Our mission at Patagonia is that we're in business to save our home planet. 1% of our revenue and 100% of our profits go to fight the environmental crisis. And I'm also the board chair of the Regenerative Organic Alliance, which administers the ROC standards and seal. Thanks.
Thanks, there, Paul. And next, Tim.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tim Brown. I own Broadview Farm and Gardens with my wife, Delicia. We're out in Marengo, Illinois, which is about 60 miles or so northwest of Chicago. We grow organic vegetables. We specialize in salad crops. So we do a lot of lettuce and radishes, cucumbers, tomatoes, and so on. We've been in business. This is going into our 9th summer growing vegetables out here. And we do a lot of farmers markets. We sell direct to restaurants, direct to grocers, small independent grocers. We have a farm stand, a small CSA, and yeah, so I'm happy to be here and talk about soil health and talk about growing food in the Upper Midwest.
That's great. Thank you, Tim. Thanks for being here. Next up, Marty Travis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Marty Travis from Spence Farm in Fairbury, Illinois. Spence Farm, in a couple more years, will have been in our family for 200 years. So my grandkids are the 9th generation. It's a 160-acre farm with about 160 acres of food production. Everything from grains to wild forage things, vegetables, pastured livestock, orchards, et cetera, et cetera. In addition to Spence Farm, I'm also co-partner, a partner with my son, Will, in another entity called Down at the Farms, where we represent now over 120 other small family farms throughout the state of Illinois, doing marketing and delivery to restaurants, grocery stores, schools, assisted living centers, other not-for-profits. And we have a new project that I'll talk about as the evening goes on. But I'm thrilled to be here and excited to be part of this panel.
Yes, we're pleased to have you, Marty. I've
Thank
been
you.
to your farm. You're just amazing work that you do. And finally, Greg Wade, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. My name is Greg. I'm a baker and managing partner at Publican Quality Bread. We're got a couple of bakeries, actually, one in Chicago and one in Oak Park now. We focus on natural fermentation, and we feature local farms, whole grains, specifically Marty's farm.
Thank you, Greg. And I'm going to turn it over to Sarah to ask the first question of Paul Lightfoot. But before I do, my fellow members of this team are a little bit humble. Sarah didn't mention that she is a 2-time James Beard Foundation Award winner, and Greg Wade is the 2019 winner for the best baker in the United States. So we're kind of with some royalty here. Sarah?
Thank you. Thank you for that, Bob. Yes. Okay. So Paul, if you would get us started in telling us about your company and how it moved into the food arena, and then what are your goals of that company, and just fill us in on what your products are.
Well, I'm not on mute, right? You can hear me. So
Yep, we can hear you.
our founder, Yvonne Chenard, gave us a quote a long time ago that we still think about. He said, people need a new jacket every 5 or 10 years, but they eat 3 times a day. If we really want to protect our planet, it starts with food. And I think that's, I think he was asked later, why again? And he said, the question is not why are we in food? It's how could we not be in food? Almost all products made by humans, including Patagon's apparel business, have an impact, a negative impact. Like human activity is destroying the planet. Food is unlike other products, though, right? Unlike apparel, which could maybe, if we do a great job, get to close to zero impact or maybe even zero impact. Food can get better than zero impact, right? Food grown with regenerative organic practices can actually be better than doing nothing. It can draw down carbon from the atmosphere. It can improve ecosystems and biodiversity. It can improve waterways. And of course, it can be better for the health of the people who eat it. But that's not what we have in today's food system. Today, we have a food system with the consequences that include the climate disaster. Synthetic fertilizer alone is more than 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions. It's destroying ecosystems, some of which we rely on to grow our food. We're growing food today that's going to make it in a way that's making it impossible to grow food tomorrow. And then the final is the destruction of the health of humans. Poor diet today is the leading cause of mortality in the United States, causing more than 500,000 deaths per year. I think it just surpassed tobacco as the leading cause of death of humans. And these deaths, which are caused by our food, and it's from diabetes, obesity, metabolic diseases, these are reversible. They're preventable with the right foods. And so in the opinion of Patagonia, regenerative organic agriculture and the foods made from that type of agriculture are the antidote to these problems. And if we're serious about our mission and our role in society, we thought we had to be in food, and so we are. And the last part of your question was sort of what products are we in? We sort of have two categories of sourcing. We have seafood, and our seafood products have our own standards that we developed because we didn't think any of the other standards were strict enough. We only make seafood from species that in their geography are thriving. They have to be abundant or rising. We don't buy seafood from any practices that are extractive or destructive. So can't have a lot of bycatch, can't use a lot of fossil fuels, can't do any dragging or trawling. And then we won't buy any seafood that is using wild caught bait or feed. We think that particularly the farmed fish industry around the world is partly destroying ecosystems by pulling out so many wild caught fish for its feed. For non-seafood, we've decided to rely entirely on regenerative organic certified foods. And from those right now, we're making beer, we're making pasta, we're making crackers, and we're about to roll into a handful of new categories as well.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And just can you give just a brief overview about what regenerative agriculture is? Because I don't think everybody is on the same page with that. And I'm sure that that's part of the discussion that everybody will have here. But I'd like to hear what you think.
Yeah, so I mentioned at my introduction that I'm the board chair of the ROA, and the ROA is the Regenerative Organic Agriculture, or Regenerative Organic Alliance, which is a nonprofit that administers Regenerative Organic Certified. So the ROA was formed, I think, in 2017 in a three-way partnership between the Rodale Institute, which really pioneered the organic standard way back when, Dr. Bronner's, which is our corporate brother from another mother, essentially. It's a company we don't have any actual deals with, but we love them and spend a lot of time with them. And we both fund the ROA and Patagonia. Before I got here, and really what we all believe is that we don't need fossil fuels to make farmland fertile. I loved Bob's introduction when he talked about how the plains of the Midwest were the breadbasket of the US before we had synthetic fertilizers, which haven't been around really since after World War II. It was well understood for thousands of years that you could use regenerative practices, even though they didn't use those words, to improve the life in soil, to work in partnership with nature to create fertility for growing crops. And I'll say it really briefly, but the practices of Regenerative Organic Certified include cover cropping, crop rotation, minimal tillage, integrating grazing animals with crops, using compost and mulching for fertilizer in addition to the animals, and then not using synthetic fertilizer pesticides. And I just want to pause there and emphasize my very deeply held belief that the use of synthetic fertilizers is one of the worst evils of the modern conventional food system. It's not just used in growing crops, it's also used in growing plants that are fed to animals that are basically all being made from natural gas, which is what synthetic fertilizer is derived from. Like I said earlier, it's more than 2% of all global greenhouse gas emissions. It destroys waterways. It destroys the life in soil, makes the soil less valuable, makes the farmland less valuable. I'll give one quick example. This is a photo, which I don't know that I'd seen before, by the way, but I can recognize that's the hand of Luke Peterson. He's a terrific farmer in western Minnesota, near the border with South Dakota. And he's demonstrating, I can tell by that ruler on the right, the depth to which the crops of Kernza go. So Kernza is in his case, it's a regenerative organic certified grain. And what sets it apart from most other grains, there he is in a pit grown to show the root system. What's really special about Kernza is that it is a perennial ground. It actually stays in the ground for years, unlike annual plants that are usually used for grains like wheat. So there's very little tilling with Kernza. There's very little there's very little needed to be used in terms of tractors and fossil fuels. And of course, because it's Regenerative Organic Certified, there's no synthetic fertilizers, there's no pesticides. Regenerative Organic starts with organic. We're making 2 products right now from it. You can see on the shelf back here, we've got a beer that we're making with Regenerative Organic Certified Kernza, and we're making a pasta as well. And this pasta is made from ROC Kernza from Luke's farm. It's also made with an ROC wheat from Saskatchewan. And this ingredient, Kernza, is fabulous. It's got this really subtle nuttiness. It's very flavorful. The food development people love working with it. And one of the things about it that I've never heard about before, I think this might be one of the few cases in the world that this is happening. We had a life cycle assessment completed on Kernza, grown on Luke's farm. And what it revealed is that while conventional wheat emits more than 1 kilogram of CO2 equivalents per 1 kilogram of wheat, 1 kilogram of Kernza grown on Luke's farm using data modeled from the farm, it actually draws down and sequesters more than 4 kilograms of carbon of CO2 equivalents on the farm. It doesn't include transportation and processing, but it shows you where we could get. There's a net negative crop on the farm with this sort of a system, and it's delicious and it's nutritious, and it gives us confidence that we could get to a world in the future where there's very little impact and maybe better than zero impact. And the last thing I'll say about ROC is that it was rolled out in 2019. The number of farms and brands is growing exponentially right now. It's really growing explosively, and for good reasons. Better taste, better nutrition, better environmental impact. And I think in many cases, the people working on it are working in really the best opportunities of their career. If you look at the SPINS data, demand and pricing power of Regenerative Organic Certified foods is as strong as anything there is in the marketplace right now.
Yep. Thank you so much, Paul. That was a great explanation. I'm going to move on to Marty because, Paul, you implied, that a lot of the benefit of regenerative agriculture comes from protecting the microbiome in the soil. And one of the slides that Rebecca showed a couple of minutes ago was that rich, deep, dark black soil. My friend Harold Wilkin at Janie's farm calls it chocolate cake. And it's just amazing that the improvement that these practices can very quickly make. Marty, you're literally down at the farm. Why don't you tell us a little bit about during your years of farming, how you've seen your soils remediated, improving, and constantly getting better?
Sure. So Bob, since the last 20 years, in 2019, actually, we moved back to our family farm. I had been a woodworker, furniture maker for 35 years. We moved back and began this journey, this circus of recreating our family's farm. And our soil has dramatically changed. So we subscribe to this effect of creating ecosystems. And that system begins in the soil. But it doesn't stop there. When we feed the biology in our soil and increase that biology, it releases more nutrients that are in the soil. When we release more nutrients, we increase the photosynthesis of our plants. Not all of us realize that most plants only are utilizing about 20% photosynthesis. So if we're able to increase the biology, the mineral nutrition, we increase the photosynthesis, and all of those extra nutrients that the plants aren't using at that moment get exuded through the root system into the soil, the more nutrients that we have in the soil, the more biology we have in the soil, the more photosynthesis happens, and we can start this hamster wheel. And Paul's right. We don't have to have all of that synthetic fertilizer because that kills it. We can walk on our farm, and I can take what's called a penetrometer and push it into the soil. We can go down nearly 18 inches, 2 feet down in our soil, and we never hit 300 PSI, pounds per square inch. I can walk 15 feet over into the neighbor's field, and I can't push it into the soil more than 2 inches, and I hit 600 PSI. Roots cannot express themselves at anything over 300 PSI. So what you saw as roots of that Kernza plant, that's amazing. But you don't see that in a conventionally farmed soil. So the more biology we have in the soil, the more nutrition is expressed and unlocked in our soils, and the healthier those plants become. We consume those plants either through livestock or through wheat, vegetables, fruits, all of that. And that then dramatically affects our own health and the health of our community.
Thank you. Thank you, Marty. I have a question for you about kind of how you work with the farmers to get to the chefs, and that, because did I hear you say you have 125 farms?
Yes.
That's huge. How do you manage that? You guys meet regularly, or what's the system?
It's a huge system, Sarah.
Yeah.
But it's a well-oiled system at this point. We bring on new farmers, and even actually, okay, so this picture that you're seeing now is from last June, the end of June. We had not received rain in 10 weeks. But if we walked into this field of cabbage, and we have an event called Down to Earth, where we do farmer training from folks from around the world, and that picture was taken that weekend. We could go in, no rain for 10 weeks. Underneath those plants, you scratch the dirt a half inch down, there's moisture. When you have the right biology, you have infiltration of moisture, but you also have percolation to where it can come back up. There's osmosis going on. Follow me?
Mm-hmm.
Then the other thing that happens with the right nutrition, these plants are capturing the dew at night. Cabbages funnel it right down, and all of that gets funneled into the soil also. So utilizing some of our techniques, we're able to create drought-resistant soils, disease-suppressive soils, and we're able to show this to a lot of our farmers and do training so that they can capitalize on these same types of information, techniques, and experiences.
That's amazing that you're crossing over so many farms and helping people improve what they do.
That's absolutely. And that photo of those beautiful cabbages, that field during the middle of a drought, it almost sums up the genius behind regenerative agriculture. I mean, it's just amazing that if you have healthy soil and healthy roots in the plants, that they are much more resilient to whatever climate change or weather issues deal up for farmers. That's just an amazing photo.
So I was in Oak Park with Paul Kahan having a meeting with a collaborative, and Sebastian White was there, and Alex from the head of Pilot Light. And Paul told me two things about Greg that kind of blew me away. The first thing was that 75% of the grains that he's using are coming from Marty's farm. And you can correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's an unbelievable statistic. And then he also made the coffee cup that I was drinking my cappuccino out of. And both of those things kind of blew me away. So Greg, can you talk about your bread and I also want to hear about your beliefs in, as a chef, why this is so important and what we could do to make a difference.
Yeah, so I think the actual statistics that I'm using, like 75% of what of the grain that gets produced on Marty's farm. Marty, does that sound right?
I think you probably get 90% of everything of all the grains on our farm.
Wow.
That's pretty great. Thank you for doing that, Marty.
You do all right, Greg.
Before I jump in to your question, Sarah, I actually had a question for Marty, and I was hoping perhaps, something that you've taught me throughout the years is the importance of diversity on the farm. And I was wondering if you could kind of speak to that, not only in your genetic diversity in the crops that you grow, but also the diversity of the things that the farm does and produces, and why that's important.
Sure. One of the things that Greg asked us this is several years ago, he said, and we were growing 3 specific different kinds of wheat for Greg, and I remember him saying, I really like the qualities of this variety for this. I like the flavor of this, and I like, this quality in this wheat. And and I knew where he was going with it, and I said, I am not blending wheat. I will blend seed and plant a polyculture, but I sure didn't want to blend wheat flour. And so what we've done is taken those 3 varieties, blended them, planted them, and most other farmers would think we have absolutely lost our mind. But we also save our own seed, and we have for years and years and years. And that seed has acclimated to our farm. So much so that 2 years ago, Will's field of Greg's wheat yielded 105 bushels of wheat, which out yielded almost every other conventional farmer in our area. And those are 3 varieties from the mid 1800s, grown organically without any other fertilizer other than an inoculation of bacteria, of microbes for our soil. So it's everything from a fruit orchard to peppers from Mexico, from South America, from Italy, from all over, all these different varieties of things that really lend they lend the diversity of biology, they lend the diversity of crops, they lend diversity of scale, and they lend diversity for cash flow throughout that season. It's really important, and I try to get all of our farms to understand that they should never be doing a monoculture of anything, because that's not what nature intended. Does that help, Greg?
Yeah, that does help. Thank you, Marty. And so kind of diversifying gives you kind of a safety net, right? Because if one thing succumbs to a drought, or you'll have other crops or something that would come in and be able to be resilient. And so the kind of what I was thinking is, like, Paul, in your I think kind of unique opportunity, because we're at least in my world, and knowing in Marty's, we're kind of focused on agriculture for food, but with with Marty's farm, where he grows vegetables and then also has livestock that go over the field maybe the next year, and then add nitrogen to the soil and kind of work the soil and get it aerated, right? I'm wondering, with Patagonia's kind of unique position where you're doing food and you're doing clothing. Like, is there an opportunity for diversifying even further? Is like having different animals that provide the materials for clothing possible in a regenerative agriculture system? Is it possible to diversify even further?
So we do make, we are maybe the world's largest buyer of regenerative organic certified cotton. And we spent years funding the research of ROC cotton. We do make some products from wool as well, which I think is probably getting close to that. We make a very small number of boots from ROC bison in South Dakota. So we are interested in looking into all these things, and I encourage you to send ideas our way.
Yeah, and Greg, just to amplify your point, one thing that it needs to be discussed with regenerative agriculture is the fact that it is so important to integrate livestock into the cycle and the rotational grazing. When people hear about it, the term regenerative agriculture, they don't necessarily think about that. But Paul, obviously you have a perspective on that, working with all kinds of farms.
Oh yeah, I think grazing animal integration is it's absolutely one of the ways that Luke Peterson, he has a 13-year rotation. It's very sophisticated. He has typical cash crops that like corn and soya, but they're regenerative organic. But he also has cover crops like buckwheat. He uses sunflowers, and he always has multi-year rotations in that 13-year rotation cycle of grazing animals.
Lost sound.
Yeah, Paul, we lost your audio.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you
Yes.
now.
I accidentally hit a button on my microphone.
There.
The integration of grazing animals, it does the fertility trick, of course, but it also does just the right amount of disturbance of the soil. And it's not a surprise, right? This is what you get with, hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. The way the plains were managed by indigenous people living alongside the bison, was truly sustainable in the beginning of the world. It went for thousands of years. It would have kept going for thousands of years if we didn't disturb it.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg, I want to circle back around with you with a question in a minute, but I also want to keep Tim waiting any longer. We'd love to get his perspectives. So we'll circle back around and have another round of questions. But Tim, you were in a completely different field, like a lot of our first-time farmers. You were doing something else. You were working in, I think it was audio tech, and then you decided to become a farmer. Tell us a little bit about your experience with what was then Angelic Organics Learning Center, is now Farmers Rising, and their Farm Beginnings program, and why you decided purposefully to become an organic farmer, starting right out.
Sure. So my journey into farming started, I don't know, maybe 8 years or so, maybe 6, 7, 8 years before. My journey into farming was also a result of personal journey into improving my own health. I always kind of was battling with weight growing up, and as an adult, I was pretty heavy, and ate a lot of processed foods, a lot of sugary foods, things like that. Cigarette smoker as well, and so I decided to make some changes, some lifestyle changes, and that led me to not only losing weight but discovering gardening. And so my journey to farming began as a backyard gardener. tore out my whole backyard, and it really just kind of consumed me. I've really felt really a passionate draw toward growing food, primarily for my family. Both my wife and I actually were not from the Midwest, so we both grew up in Los Angeles, California. So we weren't, surrounded by farms. We weren't surrounded by, well, gardens even. And so we don't have that background. But moving to the Midwest, and getting involved in gardening, I realized that there was just actually something that we could do, that we could make a go of farming. So the access to land was something that we didn't have back home. And so I hooked up with Angelic Organics, which runs the Farm Beginnings program through the CRAFT organization. CRAFT stands for Collaborative Regional Alliance for Farmer Training. And it's a network that's national. There's different partner organizations. Angelic Organics was the closest one to me. And so I hooked up with them, and they taught me the business side of starting a farm. It's a year-long program. Half of it's classroom work, and there's a mentorship program as well. So in addition to doing Angelic Organics, I went and worked for another organic farmer up in Duluth, Wisconsin. And I spent 2 years mentoring under her. And before starting my own operation here at home. We were living here on the farm. We bought the farm in 2014. And I worked for her for 2 seasons before starting my own operation here. The farm is pretty small compared to Marty's farm. By the way, Marty, hearing that your family's legacy is just inspirational, and something I aspire to as well. Our farm is 9 acres. We're in the Kishwaukee River Valley, just in McHenry County, and we have amazing soil. And as you can see, because of our farm size, we grow pretty intensely. We cultivate about 4 acres. That seems to grow a little bit every year, but right now we're about 4 acres in cultivation. So in regard to soil health, we were blessed to inherit outstanding sandy loam soil here. We're not too far from the Kishwaukee River. It's a beautiful river here, and we have really deep and fertile sandy loam soils. And so it's really important to me to make sure that I maintain that, and I'm able to pass it on to whoever comes after me, whether it's somebody from my family or not, to make sure that we pass that on and continue to improve the health of the soil here. So we, in addition to raising vegetables, we also raise a flock of laying hens. We have free-range birds. We raise pasture-raised broiler birds in the summertime. We have some area that is in permanent pasture as well, and so we raise chickens. Like Marty, we raise or have raised in the past American guinea hogs on pasture. That was part of the original farm. When we moved here, we put the farm into a cover. It was previously row cropped, and it was also used as a sod farm, which is extremely extractive. It's really, I'd say, farming sod is one of the worst things that maybe you could do to the soil. In addition to spraying a lot of chemicals, you're harvesting the soil when you harvest the sod as well. So it's very extractive. So we planted a green manure crop of clovers and grass, and we use that to both pasture animals and then convert into garden space as well as the years have gone on. So was there something else you wanted to ask, Bob?
Yeah, I do. I have a question. I understand you have a CSA, a pretty big CSA, correct?
Not a very big CSA, no, not relatively small actually. CSA is yeah, it's not a lot. a lot of people compared to other farms. But
Okay,
primarily we do farmers markets. We do 5 farmers markets a week. That keeps us pretty busy. And then between that and selling to the restaurants and to the grocery stores, that takes most of our crops.
thank you.
Mhm.
Bob, you're muted.
Thank you. I was trying to avoid that. Greg, I circling back to you real quick. Not to slight any other part of agriculture, but since I've been working in this area professionally, which is a little more than a decade, the rise of good grain is really one of the most significant, if not the most significant things to me, because I mean, I grew up in the Wonder Bread generation. We ate some really bad bread for a good part of my life. Can you talk about how your perspective has changed on grain and what it means for consumers?
Yeah, so I suppose my perspective on grain, really I guess it's more appropriate to say that the perspective on food and farming and agriculture has changed, and the grain is particularly the medium, I suppose, and the way in which we're able to express it because we're a bakery. And growing up, I was in suburban Wisconsin, and there's farmland around, but food really comes from the grocery store. It didn't particularly for us come from farms, and my understanding changed once I started working in restaurants and I started working in restaurants and met Marty, and really set me on my path to understanding biodiversity and the importance of agriculture and the importance of diversity in general. And so and also grains role in all of that. So for me, when I was first starting to bake, you just buy wheat flour, and it was it was fine. It was just the stuff that would come in, and you knew it as wheat flour, and it looked like it turned brown when you got it wet and whatever. And then in comes Marty one day into the basement of Growing the Goat, and he says, introduces himself and says, I'm a farmer and I grow wheat. And I said, okay, well, I'm a baker, and let's talk about that. Maybe it was the other way around, I'm not sure. But regardless,
Greg, your
so
sound is cutting out.
oh,
I don't know if you could lean into the mic a little.
maybe I can try this. You guys hear me?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Much better? Okay, sorry. So he brought me some samples, and he it was just night and day. We would I tried his rye against the rye that I was bringing in, and the difference was just incredible. The stuff from the store just ended up kind of tasting and smelling like cardboard, where Marty's was robust and really kind of floral and spicy and just had a lot of nuance to it. And it's really knew that we had something special. So as a chef, we're always looking for the best tasting ingredients. So that's really where I started. Was, wow, this tastes really, really good. And then from there was able to spend some time on Marty's farm and spend some time learning about the way that it's all grown, and why it's grown, and the importance of all of it, and found that the importance of small grains in a regenerative agriculture cycle, and being able to support that and develop that into my baking was incredibly important and transformative for me.
Thank you. Thank you. Bob, should we open up for questions if there are people that from the audience?
I'll get this
We're-
mute thing down one of these days. Yes, we should open it up for questions.
There's one
what-
particularly excellent question in the chat. It says, other than the tradition of having always done it that way, what is stopping conventional farms that don't use regenerative practices from using them?
Who wants to take that?
I'll start. I mean,
Thank you.
I'd say in most cases, I wouldn't start by blaming the farmers, who generally are the type of people who care more about their land than anybody, but they're in a system that makes it hard to switch. I just saw an article on this topic on the RSFI Forums website. This is the Regenerative Systems Finance Institute or something like that. Basically, there's a system that the USDA administers that's created by the Farm Bill that reduces the risks and shifts a lot of the burden of the risk of farmers onto U.S. taxpayers if they farm conventionally, if they grow corn and soy. And most of the farmland in the Midwest is just doing that. It's growing glyphosate resistant GMO corn and soy with synthetic fertilizers and with pesticides. And a lot of farmers are doing it because if they do something else, their income is at risk. And they're taught by, all the Land Institute universities, they're taught by the USDA. They feel pressure from these input suppliers who are really dominant in their communities to do it like everybody else. I mentioned that farmer Luke Peterson before. He started farming conventionally and felt like it was inconsistent with his values. He didn't have anyone he could really turn to. There was one guy down the road farming organically who was sort of the outcast in his town. And he decided he could handle the social, disapproval almost of working with that guy. And he did. But that's really hard for a lot of farmers. Their communities and their cultures are dominated by conventional agriculture, and it's where the markets are.
Thank you.
Can I add to that for a second? So
Yeah.
I think that
Please.
I think that kind of parallels a lot of things happening in the food systems in general. In like once we actually receive the crops that are grown, for us as a bakery, it's really no different. It's just a different kind of part of the chain where, like, why don't more people utilize local whole grains? Why don't more people make sourdough bread? Why don't more people it's like these things take a lot of skill and a lot of dedication, and it's the same thing with the farming. I think a lot of people these days equate something being hard with something that they don't want to deal with, but the reward for doing it is much, much greater and really, really important in the system in general. So like if you're opening up a bakery and you want to, make a bunch of money, you're not likely going to open up a sourdough bakery. You're going to open up a big factory bakery where you've got all of these machines and all of these mechanics, and you're able to use really consistent dough and really consistent flour and all these things. But it makes it easier, and I think it's the same thing with conventional agriculture. It's a system that's built for scale and production and things like that. Where I think that the important thing that I had to come to realize at a certain point was that the monetary success of a business or the monetary success of a lifestyle is not the only thing that we should be judged on. That's not true success. When we think about success in the context of the bakery, we think of, are we creating really excellent product? Are we doing good for the community? Are we engaging the right people? Are we able to train our staff or give them good lives and a livable wage? And are we able to teach them and have them grow as people within our while we have them with us? And in that is like, are we, being good stewards of the land, and how are we stewards of the earth? And You know, so success really needs to be defined more as more holistic than just how much money is the business making. And I think it needs to start there.
Great.
Yeah,
Are you ready? Oops, sorry. Are you ready for another question
Yes, please.
from the chat, Sarah and Bob?
Yes,
yes, go
please.
ahead, please.
Okay, great. This is an excellent question. I've heard that becoming a certified organic farm can be really expensive. Is that true for shifting to regenerative practices as well?
You want me to go again?
Mhm.
It depends on how you define regenerative. If you're going to shift to Regenerative Organic Certified, you're going to start with organic. So yes, it will be the same cost. To go from organic to regenerative organic isn't necessarily more expensive, but it is some more paperwork. Because in addition to soil health, it's also animal and farm worker welfare. I would ask sort of a related question, which is like, what does it cost not to shift? You know, all of you know someone or have personally experienced some sort of the negative impacts of the climate crisis. That's going to get worse and worse. You know, watch the climate refugees pouring out of parts of Texas and Arizona over the next couple of decades. Consider what it costs to have our waterways fouled by runoff nitrogen from synthetic fertilizer. I think that if the true costs environmentally were included in the cost of food, going to organic wouldn't be more expensive at all.
There's another question. How long does it take a farm to shift its practices?
Marty, you want to answer that?
Marty?
Sure. Not as long as we think. According to organic standards, there's a 3-year, basically a weaning off or non chemical use. But in practice, utilizing regenerative and soil and plant health, I've seen remarkable changes in 6 to 12 months. There are organic products out there that can boost soil biology to the point where if we give the soil and the microbes what they need, they can totally, there's products out there that will mitigate oil disasters, radiation disasters, and these are microbes. And so I've seen firsthand on a lot of our farms what a difference a year, one season can make. But these are all techniques. These are all informational things that I think more and more folks will come to understand, and the return on investment on these is amazing. The input cost is fairly small to begin that cycle of the hamster wheel. And I think it's important to help beginning farmers understand the significance of great soil biology and what they can do on their land in a very, very short period of time.
Thank you. Thank you. I want to say that, you know, as a chef, making the choices through everyday purchases of where I can put my money, the more I put into local agriculture, the better off we are. It is my vote. It is what I can do to make a difference. And each of you as individuals, we are allies. We are united in this in terms of keeping our health and our food system moving forward, and spreading this word about how you can impact by going to farmers markets. When you go to Mariano's, look for that pasta. Is it on the shelf, Amanda? Is it up yet? You gonna tell us when
it's coming soon, but we do have the addictive crackers on sale now, actually. So
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like-
Coincidentally.
crackers as well. Regenerative Organic
Yeah.
Certified wheat from the Skagit Valley, Washington.
It's like, be smart about where you put your money, and it'll protect your health. And then this is the story about what it does to our earth and protecting our earth. And these people are our heroes and our champions that are in the front lines of the climate crisis and our food system. And whatever we can do, if it means coming on a Zoom so that you're better educated, that you could speak better about it, and that you understand why. Why is it important to protect our food system? Because we all throw that around. I mean, I don't know how many times I've said, and for future generations. And I think if you don't understand the backstory of it, and you come from a place that isn't educated, it's very difficult to then spread that information. And why? And Greg said it, it's about taste. Like for us as chefs, it's about taste. What these people grow is going to be the most delicious food.
Yeah,
Can I share, Bob, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that chefs really played an enormous role in reviving the local food ecosystem here. People like Sarah, people like Rick Bayless, Paul Kahn, Paul Veron, Jason Hamill, who rallied together at a time that it was very hard to find. The conventional agriculture system had so overtaken our agricultural system in this region that chefs really had to like hunt to find it until Marty, started starting with Steward of the Lands, had aggregated the product of the farmers in his region to sell it into restaurants. And so when Sarah started, was a co-founder of Green City Market in 1999, 25 years ago, it was almost like lighting a fuse and creating a whole different environment for what became the new century.
I'd love to add an idea, if I could, before we're done with this topic. The one area in our economy that almost any citizen can have some influence on is the food in schools. If you combine the aggregate demand of school food, it would be the largest restaurant in the nation, and almost all schools in the U.S. are controlled locally. And you'd be amazed if you show up with 5 people at consecutive school board meetings, how much of an influence you can have. But if you look at the Alice Waters Institute or the Chef Ann Foundation, they're doing amazing work. And I've got 2 kids at a high school right now that are on a task force at their school, basically saying we want our school to be a demand magnet for local regenerative organic certified produce and all food. And it's just a great thing for kids to work on. It's a great thing for parents to work on. And there's no downside for the schools except for the uncomfortable exercise of kicking out the middlemen that are serving the processed foods instead of fresh local food. It can be budget equivalent.
And that topic is ours in 4 weeks is what we're going to be talking about, because this goes hands in hand with what we have now. Marty, I know you were dying to say something.
Yeah, and I'll try to be brief, Bob and Sarah. Down at the farms, and Spence Farm started out as a supplier to chefs and restaurants. Today, we supply school districts, we supply assisted living senior centers, other not-for-profits. And in the last 4 to 5 weeks, we have taken on another major project of setting up a system to supply underserved communities downstate and in Chicago through some state grants called the LFPA grants. Millions of dollars have been put toward this program. We are changing not only those communities, but next week we will be taking on, besides the 180 families that we serve each week with groceries, I'm sending 3,000 pounds of flour, 3,000 pounds of rolled oats, 3,000 pounds of cornmeal, 3,000 pounds of rice, 3,000 pounds of ground beef, and 3,000 pounds of ground pork to one food bank. And we will do that every other week for the next 1.5 years. We're talking about millions of dollars coming back into local farms and changing the lives of those farmers. Yeah, I agree with Greg. It's not all about the money, but in some cases, this is going to be the difference between saving a farm and losing a farm.
Yeah, absolutely, Marty. Thank you for bringing that up. That's such an important topic. And I get a little verklempt because it's so important. But underscoring what you're doing down at the farms has gathered so many farmers together to aggregate product because these small farmers individually can't get their food into institutions. They can't get it into schools for the most part. They can't get it into the assisted living places, but working together the way you and your leadership has created has really created the environment in which that can be done, and it needs to be replicated over and over and over again.
Yes.
Thank you guys. It is now 8 o'clock. We've hit our hour marker. I want to say again, thank you to everybody, all of the guests that have come on, and Amanda Puck for sponsoring with Mariano's, Rebecca Fife for Landmark Pest Management, and Chicago Chef's Cook, Ida Davidman, Darren Guest, Melissa Clark for sponsoring us. If you would like to stay on, I am inviting you to stay on for another few minutes. We're going to continue the conversation, but I want to express my sincere gratitude for all of you. Carol Wagner, Sherry Doyle, Arshia, all of you that have come on, John Burke. I see you, I hear you, I appreciate your support, and I know that you are also in the front lines with us to try and make a difference in the world. Bob?
Yeah, and before everybody goes away, I want to tell you that our topic for the next webinar, episode 2, in 2 weeks from today, that's April 29th, will be our outdoor farmers market preview and why you should shop at farmers markets. So I can't think of a more fun topic. I can't think of a more timely topic. And we will be sending out information about how to sign up for that one. And we hope you'll all join us, and tell your friends to join us for that one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For those who are continuing, we do have another great question in the chat. Sarah and Bob, can you take one more?
Yes.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so some of the participants are asking for help with definitions. So how is an organic farm not regenerative, and are all regenerative farms organic?
That's a good question. Organic farms, there are certain organic farms that can still be, in my opinion, somewhat extractive and not really focused on regeneration. There's farms that are on slightly larger scales that they almost treat it conventionally, in the sense that they're not as focused on maybe integrating animals and livestock into their operation. Maybe they choose not to use chemicals, and they might apply compost or do cover crops, but they might not be really fully embracing the regenerative aspect. So I don't think it's inherent that organic farms are quote unquote regenerative. As far as regenerative farms being all organic, I don't know about that either. There might be some regenerative farms that choose to also implement more conventional techniques, as far as how they treat certain weeds in their pastures, or how they treat certain weeds or something like that in their fields as well. So I don't know. In my opinion, maybe Marty has some more input on that, but I don't think that those things are necessarily always hand in hand.
Yeah,
I think that's a great
Yeah.
Response, Tim. I agree with what you said, definitely.
yeah, and a lot of it has to do with the centrality of soil health and the sanctity of the microbiome in the soil that is at the core of regenerative agriculture. Organic has taken us a long way in reducing chemical inputs. the chemical fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides. You can't be certified organic, USDA certified organic if you use GMO seeds in your corn. But that doesn't necessarily translate to the treatment of the soil. Regenerative agriculture is no-till. It means that you're not running equipment through the rows and breaking up the dirt, because when you break up the dirt, you're breaking up what's in the dirt, and that's all the fungi and the worms and things like that that help to build that soil health. And so that's really an important dividing line between the two, and why a lot of people believe that regenerative agriculture is more of the solution towards ultimate sustainability than simply organic. But that's not to at all criticize organic farmers, because there are still more of them than there are regenerative, and they've improved the quality of our food and the health and nutritional value of our food tremendously.
Any other questions? Greg, you
No, I was just going to say that I just wanted to thank everybody thank I actually got to jump off. I got a couple bakeries to run in the morning. But Sarah and Bob, thank you so much for organizing this.
Oh, thank
and,
you. Thank Marty. Thank Paul and Tim. We are so honored to have this is our very first one. Yeah, we kind of threw it out there and hoped that we could get a panel like this, and we did. And I think that I'm hoping that everybody who was able to attend today and the other people who get the recording will agree. This has been a great conversation.
all right. Well, thanks, guys.
thank you.
So I think we will just say goodnight and sign off, and hopefully we'll see a whole bunch of you in 2 weeks.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.